black racism on white. I've seen farms being taken over by Mugabe forces, the ZANU-PF people. What is the African Union doing to, when we talk about racism from Africa and we bash colonists, and we actually are doing that to their citizens right there, what are you going to do to recompensate and rehabilitate those citizens who have been there for 4 generations, 5 generations? What is African Union going to do for that?
Okay, I like the fact that you're putting a timeline there. See, with history, we have a tendency to say, well, let's start the story from here moving forward. But let's not talk about the story going back. In Zimbabwe, you have to say, how did we get there? Let me take 1 minute and summarize it for you. When the British came to Zimbabwe, they analyzed the country and divided it into 4 regions. Region 1 was the best soil, the best rains, best conditions for farming. Region 2, pretty close to Region 1. Region 3, there were some areas there, the soil was not so good, and the rain was good, but not the best. Region 4, no rain. The soil was horrible, mosquitoes and sesaflies. So they set out a plan. If you were an adventurous British, a veteran of the First or Second World War, you were guaranteed 2,000 hectares. Hectares, multiply 2,000 by 2.2. You were guaranteed that much in Zimbabwe, plus any loot from the local people. So a British man would land in Zimbabwe. So based on the regions that they had decided, they were going to move all the black people, preferably from the region 1 and 2 to region 4. So the process started. And how did a British map up their land? You got on a horse, they'll tell you this region. Get on a horse, and you ride in one direction for a day until either you or your horse were tired. You put your bag. Tomorrow morning, you do the same thing. So it took 4 days for the Englishman to map up his land. At the end of the 4 days, everything in it is yours. And the people who lived on that land were told, in this direction, go past this mountain. In this direction, go past this river. They left with whatever they could carry. The chickens, the goats, the cows, they were theirs. And some of them were not so lucky. You're barely settled again when another Englishman came, and he was given that part. And there you were again. Slowly, the process of moving black people to the west parts of the country started, and it was finally completed in the 50s. Now, you want to ask me who needs to be compensated? Are you with me?
Yes.
So we got to go to the beginning rather than understanding things superficially. How did you get your hand? It just goes about how fast you could go. Some of these farmers were owning 5, 6, 7 farms. I know my family farm, and I grew up hearing the story from my own father. When the situation took place in the case of my father, he remembers distinctly, he was a teenager. And he used to, when white men came to Africa with their pants, they called them men without knees. He remembers men without knees coming to the village on horses. There was some hush-hush talk. He didn't know what was going on. But he remembers waking up one morning and the whole village was on fire. They were being torched by these men without knees on horses. His aunt was pregnant and was due any day. So they had asked for permission for her to stay until she delivers. It was one little hut that was left standing in a burnt-out village. They left with whatever they could carry. Sadly for them, Aunt didn't deliver for 3 weeks. My father spoke about how scared he was every morning. The men without knees coming to check and see if my aunt had delivered. There was him, an uncle, another grandmother who was the midwife, and another aunt. They all crumbled up in this one room. When she finally delivered, 3 days after delivery, they were told to walk, go find the others who had left before. Now the loot law, it's in the history books. You don't have to go far. It's in the British history books. As a matter of fact, the British started fighting themselves over how to distribute the loot as they go from one place, one village to the other. It was acceptable. So, son, do you still want to ask me who is owed what? May I rest my case?
Thank you.
You're welcome.
But those people still have families. We need to be compassionate.
Thank you.
Did you hear his comment that the people who literally, the British that came to Zimbabwe and most parts of South Africa, that's where you see this madness going on with the city. They call it black racism now, or whatever, that the blacks are rising up against the British, the white British, 3, 4, 5 generation later, who have literally stolen. She just gave you an example how the land was stolen and taken away with brutality from the native Africans in Zimbabwe and South Africa. A woman who just gave birth, 3 days later you told her to walk with a baby. Then you want to come and ask for compassion? That dude who asked that question, everything the woman just relayed to him, how the land was taken. Where was the compassion? You want compassion now when you didn't give compassion to the original owners who owned the land that you literally stole, burned down the villages and told them to go to the next place. And when they settle within a few weeks or a few months, a group of British will come again and say, they keep pushing you back and keep pushing in your own land. Please name me one place in American history, in Europe history, in British history, in any history of the white man. And this is not white or black or white. But let's just name, where have you seen blacks or Africans that would just go into your country and just overtake your land and tell you go stay anywhere you want? That has never happened. Why must this continue to happen? And this is happening in Africa. What is the British man, first of all, doing in Africa? Is Africa a British man's homeland? Honestly, is South Africa a white man's land? We're going to have to be honest and sincere. Okay, they said they have been there for 3, 4, 5 generations. But she just explained. 3, 4, 5 generations prior, who owned the land? How did you take away the land from the original owner? And then 3, 4, 5 generations later, you don't expect the original owner and their children to rise up? Are we serious? And especially someone also who are Christians, do we serve a fair and just God? We think such atrocity, injustices, racism will happen to the Africans in South Africa, the black Africans, the Zimbabweans, in their own land, and their own land were taken away from them. And then the people who took it, which are the British, the white, they took the people's land. They have settled there 3, 4, 5 generations, have children, and they just expect to live in peace. Okay, let's just compensate. You want to talk about compensation? What about, she just gave an example about her father was a teenager at that time. Their land was taken away from them. So what about the compensation now? Her father, who's, I'm sure he's a little bit older now, of course. So what about their land? Are they going to get compensated? Because you think about it. If your great-great-grandfather was a billionaire or a trillionaire, and his money was taken away from him forcefully as these people's land was taken away from them, and now you are broke, busted, and disgusted in your own land, look at your life. Don't you think your life would have been better if your grandfather's land was not stolen or your father's wealth was not taken away from him forcefully? And then the people who, children, 4 generations later, are enjoying the sweat of the land that your father owned that was stolen away from them. We want justice. We have to first give justice to those who injustices were served to them in their own land. Can you imagine? And many South African white, they will come to me and say, we are Christian, we should pray for justice. I say, listen, to be in all fairness and honesty, when the Bible says, talk about sowing and reaping, you cannot go and sow injustice, thief, racism in somebody's own land. You left your place from Great Britain and you went to Africa. And then you stole the people's land, kicked them out of their own land. 4, 5 generations later, they are rising up and then you want justice? You want compensation? You want them to show compassion and mercy? Are you serious? If we can confront the truth, address the truth, and sit down and talk like civilized people, as opposed to emotionalism and sentiment, say, oh, let's just forget, that's in the past. Let's just start from here going forward. So those children who their parents and grandparents lost the land to you, now they should just leave you the land because of justice. And is that even justice? Because of compassion. Is that even compassion? Let's be honest. Let's sit down as human beings. There needs to be some apologies. First of all, that this happened in your own country. Africa, if we don't wake up and take back our continent exactly what happened to the Native American. They can put us on a reserve in our own continent in some jungle somewhere, and that's it, and they'll take over the continent. Why everybody fighting for a piece of the pie of Africa? Are there a group of black people up in in Europe or in Great Britain or Sweden or Denmark? Are there any group of black people there that are fighting for land? Can we even do that? Even when we go there, do we even have equal rights? They will say, oh yeah, they will say they don't discriminate. But please show me a group of black people in Great Britain, in anywhere in Europe, that have the audacity to march in the street and say, this is our land because we've been here 3-4 generations. Really? Tell us how you took the land, first of all. This is about justice. Well, since black and white is in it, I have to mention it. But this is about justice and fairness and sowing and reaping. You cannot continue to steal Africa's land in their own country, in their own continent, kick their children out, kick them out, and then settle there in 4 or 5 generations. You want justice, and the people rising up to take back the land, you say you want justice. I'm sorry, you gotta go. You don't agree with me? Well, I don't know what to tell you. Bless you.
As a matter of fact, the British started fighting themselves over how to distribute the loot as they go from one place, one village to the other. It was acceptable. So, son, do you still want to ask me who is owed what? May I rest my case?
Thank you.
You're welcome.
But those people still have families. We need to be compassionate.
Thank you.
Those people still have families too. I do have families. And when I go home and they're still in Region 4, I got a problem with that.
Thank you.
Thank you.